Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how NASA manages team performance risk. We've got quite a few attendees, so while we wait for everyone to join, we'll conduct a poll to hear from you, and the question will pop up on your screen now. Today, we are fortunate to have Ian Sharpe as our guest speaker. Ian brings a wealth of experience in project leadership and capability development. He has worked with a number of prominent high-profile organizations, including NASA. I look forward to hearing about his experience there and elsewhere. Before we kick off, I'd like to run you all through what you can expect today. We'll start with a presentation from Ian in about a minute or two, and this will take just under half an hour. This will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. Please send your questions to us while Ian is talking, and use the GoToWebinar widget on your screen during Ian's presentation, and we'll get through as many as possible in the second part of the webinar. If we can't get through all your questions, please feel free to contact either myself, Simon Wolf-Coote, or Ian after the webinar. So without further ado, Ian, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ian Sharpe speaking. Would like to thank Simon for the opportunity, and I'd also especially like to thank you for your time this morning or this evening, depending on the part of the world you're dialing in from. My working relationship with NASA from the outset has been a relationship of consultancy since 2012, and what I'm looking to do is to share with the community one of the things that NASA does to manage team performance risk. It's an area that internationally tends to get far too little attention until usually it's too late. So we're going to be talking about a number of aspects in terms of the presentation here today, and to step through those, we're going to be talking about what trumped the best technical minds on the planet, including NASA, the unpleasant reality that's actually behind technical failures, and making the real cause of this tangible, make it visible and then measurable. Because if we can't, we have no hope of controlling this risk. What we're then going to look at is how NASA actually uses this cause to build high-performance leaders and teams through the process. And we're going to be concluding this session with some questions. We'll be taking questions, noting them throughout the session. Simon is reading the questions and feedback as we go through, and then Simon will be picking first in, first served on those questions. We'd be delighted to answer people's specific questions after the session too. So please don't hesitate to ask either of us about that. So I want to start with a question to the whole community. We're not polling this, but because we think the answer is probably clear. On a day-to-day basis, which takes up more of your time? What's the thing that takes up more energy and attention? Is it the technology issues? Or is it the people? Now, given it's now been 6,591 days since I last heard the technology answer being the root cause of the problem, I'm going to make a placing assumption with everybody that it's the people who are grinding your gears, not the technology. And the thing that surprised me, in fact actually shocked me, is that's NASA's answer too. Even NASA believes that sometimes the people issues are harder than going to the moon, conceptually anyway. And we're going to have a look at why and what they're actually doing about controlling that. The truth is that dealing with team issues and people issues can be pretty messy, and it can be pretty hard. If we go to change individuals, anybody married or partnered, I think, has had the experience that changing individuals is very hard and one at a time. I succeeded. One of my solutions to changing my loved one at the time was divorce, but this is a pretty harsh measure, and we often can't divorce teams. So it's pretty unclear when you're in this kind of tomato fight about how good your team really is and how good your own leadership contributing towards that team performance actually is as well. So we started off with a logical inquiry and said, well, the common denominator is people here. Maybe personality tests can help. Certainly can help pick broken people, but the results can feel a little strange, and then we're examining individuals. And I think one of the biggest insights I had was that With great respect to personality profiling tools, none of these tests prove how good a team you actually have. And none of them prove how good a leader you actually are. It's Scott Adams of Dilbert fame on, if they did, we would work this way. And I'll give you a moment just to take this insight on board and see if you enjoyed this as much as I did when I first saw it. With great respect to the Myers-Briggs practitioners amongst us, they don't argue this way either. My personal favourite is this, is personalities being assigned by human resources. Can you imagine the consequences that would occur? The interesting thing is that, well, if we're talking about, well, what's okay and what's not, what really governs okay? We've got to have something measurable here after all, and there's an answer. And I'm going to unpack this answer over the next few slides. It's context. And in fact, specifically, it's team social context, the situation we are in that says whether behaviours are actually okay or not. Now, there's another, we talk about this all the time. We don't even realise it. It's the way we do things around here. It's when we act in a certain way. If somebody lit up a cigar in the workplace during one of your meetings, would you look to perform in this way? Would you look to intervene in this way? So one of the things that we need to watch out for is almost certainly if somebody was smoking a cigar, you would intervene, you would say something, somebody would be censured. Yet in the mid-1960s, that was perfectly okay. Now that's a social element. The reality is we're all social creatures first and foremost as a species. The lone wolf is the exception to the rule. We hunt in packs. We call these teams cities, communities, villages, project teams, operational teams, executive teams. It doesn't matter. The common denominator is people, and the biggest pressure on us as people is in fact context. If you don't believe me, next time you get in a lift or elevator, stand facing the back of the lift. Don't adjust your tie or your blouse. Don't check your phone. Just stand quietly facing the back. You'll probably feel strange, but not as odd as you will when somebody else joins the lift. And if you saw this person, would you want to get into the lift? Would you say something? Would it be obvious to you? Of course it will. So we don't think about how much context shapes our behaviours because it's like breathing air to us as a species. We just do it. We've been raised to do it. We've been trained to do it. And we have a natural predilection towards doing this. It's in the same way that a magnet drives iron filings. You can't see the magnetic field, but you can sure as heck see the behaviour of the iron filings driven by that field. Now, if the shape of the field and the filings was important to us, wouldn't we want to change where those iron filings are? And it would obviously be crazy to take tweezers and shift each individual filing while the field's still in place. If we wanted to change the pattern, we change the field, not the filings. And social context is the same way. We work with the most powerful force on human behaviour to help drive and align behaviours. And there's a really important reason for doing this. Gilbert found that 75% of the time, the context we're in trumps skills. Now, that's just a statistic. Let me give you some plain examples and very highly visible examples about why you need to pay attention to this. 3 times that it was gotten wrong. Challenger blew up on launch famously because of the technical cause, the O-ring failure on the booster. These slide sets will be available post the webinar if you want to read this in detail. I would like to move quickly through these, but the actual cause found by NASA's Failure Review Board was the O-ring. The really interesting thing was when you destroy several $100 million worth of hardware and you kill 7 astronauts, Congress wants to know the real reason why. And the O-ring is not good enough an answer. The interesting thing was Diane Vaughan, who was on the Challenger hearing panel, asked and steered the panel in the right direction. She says, I want to know, why did the team proceed to launch when all of the evidence indicated otherwise? And Congress came to the right answer through that hearing. They found over the years a culture of hurry up and get it done shifted NASA's behaviours to require ever more complicated and harder justifications not to launch than to just proceed. These are some of the best technical minds, smart, capable people on the planet. The issue is not the technical skill, it's the behaviour, it's the context they're in, and Congress concluded it was a failure of leadership. We named this context team social context. Behaviours we're all okay with. Diane Vaughan in the Challenger launch decision called it the normalisation of deviance. In Australia, we have a different phrase for this. We call this incremental stupidity, where over time, what you and I would all agree as perfectly dangerous or strange behaviours against common sense become acceptable, become the default. Every one of us has workplace decisions which have suffered from this. This is an extreme example. Hubble Space Telescope. Now, if you recall anything about Hubble at all, you might recall it had a flawed mirror. The world's leading optical contractor made a 101 mistake. The mirror was overground. It was a simple process error that caused it to be overground. And the real cause found again when the congressional hearing was every time that the contractor had spoken up to speak to NASA, and there was a schedule overrun, there was a budget overrun, and there were a number of these on Hubble, NASA gave them a bit of punishment. And by punishment, I mean a fairly hard slap to the head. Now that was default normal contract management style at the time. Well, it doesn't take very many slaps to the side of the head to realise that if you don't have to raise something as a problem because you've been able to rationalise it away, there's nothing really wrong there, then you'll do that by preference to being open and discussing. Let me be clear, PerkinElmer did not represent, did not mislead Congress or NASA at all about the problem with the mirror. They simply attributed a different cause to why they had funny results, but it was okay. They were still in specification. So conversation proceeded from there. From Dr. Charlie Pellerin, who was the head of astrophysics for NASA at that time, directly has said if he had had a way of noticing and fixing the relationship so it was more open and trusting to appreciate the contractor for the difficulties they had and what they were achieving, this problem would certainly not have occurred. The real problem, you've blown $2.7 billion, it's taken 15 years for your program to have delivered, and you've now internationally embarrassed your country because of a hostile relationship, ultimately. Mars Climate Orbiter, deorbited. Lockheed Martin were executing in metric navigation, and Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the other mission control at NASA, was running in imperial units. It's not Lockheed Martin's fault. They're doing what the contract says. Why on earth wouldn't somebody at JPL have spoken up? Well, they did. But hurry up, get it done. It'll be okay. You know, we're getting some funny data here. It'll be okay. The context of hurry up, get it done. Better, cheaper, faster was NASA's mantra at the time under the Golden administration. And the result was several $100 million worth of hardware crashed on the surface of Mars. And again, Congress wants to know why you spent several $100 million to make a crater on Mars. Now an N-prime satellite is being constructed. It is a really bad Monday morning for you. You do $135 million worth of damage to a project that costs $200 million in its entirety. What happened? Restraining bolts weren't in place, and the workers rotated the cradle without doing a 2-minute procedural check. Crash. Take that photo in for a moment. 2 minutes could have prevented $135 million. Well, do we say it's the fault of the restraining bolt? No. Why did they violate the procedure? And the finding of the Failure Review Board was poor communications, known problems not being acted, a culture of inattention during that hurry up, get it done, the process, supervisors not enforcing procedure, and we've had the $135 million result. It's people. Again, not the bolt, not the O-ring, not the navigational units. So the reality of project failure is that all of these things first appear to have obvious technical failures, and we spend a lot of effort finding the technical failures on projects and major operational outages. And technical people are very clever and very good at finding technical problems. Well, we don't really look beyond that until it's really large. The reality was we invest the time to look to the real root cause when it's been such a massive amount of hurt and damage, we can't do otherwise. And okay, I've only given an example of some huge publicly visible mishaps/disasters and just a sprinkling of these. Go have a look at every other major disaster. In terms of lack of preparation, you will find the same cause. What interests me most, or what interested NASA, was obviously they want to prevent the large publicly visible and disasters of any kind, but what about the smaller stuff-ups, day to day, the ones that don't blow project budgets by millions, that don't injure or kill people? There's a cumulative effect for those too. And if we can't treat things for the smaller causes, inevitably we could be on track for a fairly nasty skid for something larger. So in 2002, NASA went to the market and asked for help, and Dr. Charlie Pellerin, being known to the agency, now retired from the agency, was brought in to help. So let's switch to making this tangible. The commitment was to make this measurable, manageable. We need some fast, actionable data out of this. We start off on the basis of neurology, although Carl Jung had the insight as well to say for performance, people need to feel appreciated. We need to feel we belong. We have to have something hopeful to aim towards, and it's real, and we have to have the ability to meet others' expectations. What are we going to measure it on? Well, to develop key indicators, they must address the needs, have had test, retest, and test again in industry, and the minimum predictor that we can make, the more accurate our test and the more efficient our test is. So for each of those 4 dimensions of human needs, we have 2 key indicators. We formed those on the basis of broad research from Gallup's meta-study, validated it on major programs, HST, Hubble Space Telescope Servicing Mission experience, made them appealing. We're going to talk a little bit about how appealing they have been, and importantly, it's not enough to measure. It must drive a change. We must be able to see that change and help others see what to look for so they know what to go looking for so they can transfer this themselves. And it must have applicability universally, and to date, over 75 countries are utilising, including, of course, NASA, on the 4D system. The 2 behaviours per need, if you want a culture and a context in your team of high respect, enjoyable work, energized collaboration, we look to these 2 behaviours and say, how healthy are they? To raise inclusion and meet the need to feel a belonging, we raise these 2 behaviours. Raise visioning, to improve creativity, to improve calling out nasty realities and then moving quickly into action. These are the 2 we focus on. And for directing, to shut down drama, to make sure everybody is accountable, not responsible. We want accountability because then they own it. We stop wasting time and energy chasing people. These are the 2 we focus on. 8 key behaviours to drive. And how it's assessed is an online system. So a typical NASA team will log on as the team. For each of those 8 behaviours, we draw why is it important, what's the standard, you can see the standard for expressing authentic appreciation. Then they grade that and say, not how are we each doing it, how's our team doing it, which is a little more structural and safer for people, and they can write a comment. These are online and anonymous unless you call out who you are in your commentary. It's typically about 15 minutes for people to do that across the 8. They also contribute on what works well and what does not. And then the team leader will discuss the report with the team members, and they decide what actions they're going to focus in on 2 behaviours. What that really does is secretly helps the team start to take accountability, because they choose the actions that will work for them in the context that they're in. And once they've turned them into action items, every one of our teams knows how to handle action items. This maintains attention and drive on that. So let's look at a typical team. This curve of benchmarking is from 0 to 500 teams, and the very first time they were assessed. The team in the red is pretty sickly. This is the reality of the behaviours you see. The team in the green does not have superpowers. This is consistency and effectiveness. Every team can get to this with the right focus and leadership. Why does NASA use this for team performance risk? Well, ask yourself, for the team that's benchmarking in the red, even if you gave them everything, do you have any confidence as an executive that they can deliver anything of significant value? Now, team in the green does not say, well, you're in the green, you'll have a 100% chance of project success. We know there are too many variables. What NASA realizes that that team has a greater chance of success because we are mitigating some of the biggest drivers of some of the largest disasters, which is broken behavior. Now, that team we spoke about, say they benchmark right on the cusp of top. This is achievable for most teams. There's a spread of results. You notice there that not everybody has to be united or agreed on their opinion, but the weight is definitely with, yes, I feel independently, each one of us feels that we're definitely improved, and there is a score on health for each behaviour. What does this mean? Well, raising it through repeat assessment is how NASA focuses on addressing this, to keep attention. The team in the red, on the average, for each time the teams that started off in the red and improved, they've raised to 66% on the next time they assess and talk through the report. A little further, 75% by the time they've done their 4th assessment. Oh, well, what about teams that are a little better? There's the journey on the basis of the actual historical data of how they've done on average, where they started, from the average bracket, above average, to top. Now, when this data was first assembled, this is what prompted Dr. Charlie Pellerin to write his book, How NASA Builds Teams, because he realized that something is so powerful that if starting from the red, the pink, or the white, you're improving on average about 5%, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 15 minutes to call it out, and then about 90 minutes of you and your team having a conversation on what do we want to put attention on and focus to improve. Now, if you had 5% less schedule slippage, 5% less usage of contingency in a budget, let me put it 5% in a different light. Olympic teams often train to 0.001 of a second. That can make the difference between bronze and gold. And we're talking 5% here in terms of reassessment. We're not making a great claim of improving and saving the world here, but this is why NASA started using it. And an example from how it helped them as an organization is at Marshall Space Flight Center, that over a number of teams, a number of years using this, the scores you're looking at are the average improvement year on year of the very first time a new team did their assessment. And by 2008, they're at 80%. They're top quintile, brand new team, and they're already up there. But it wasn't the case in 2003. Now, they haven't had that big a workforce change. Why? Well, student t-test says that about 20% of Marshall has been engaged and about 20% improvement. It turns to be strongly correlated. And what's really happening here is that the average scores are increasing because as team members cross-pollinate, shift between teams, they take these behaviours with them. They've now learned to be habitual. And it's easier for them to be modelled by other people, specifically and helpfully when the leader of the team starts off in that way as well. But the team has to act. This is an interesting indicator because you can link this in as an indicator as to the health of your team and call out your team performance risk within a dashboarding solution. And there's a great example here from Project Objects here. You can see on the right-hand side, the team performance indicator is calling out to the executive a risk factor that's not normally visible at all, especially not to the team, and definitely not to your executive audience. So what has NASA gained from this? Well, they have reduced performance risk from leaders and teams. It's helped them develop a structured language and actual behavioural competencies, which are notoriously hard, stop them firefighting, helping prevent distressed teams, and of course rescuing existing ones. And because it works with a team in their context, you're developing the leadership capability. These are leadership behaviours of all people simultaneously, not just the leader. And that helps them with sustaining accountability. The most important thing is it's given them clear calls to action. Now, I don't propose to read through all of these slides in detail, but I'm just going to put up some stats here on the screen for you to have a look at the sheer volume of engagement. Let me put this in context. No professional development on this is compulsory at NASA, ever. It's an opt-in. That means if the project teams, the program teams, the operational teams are doing this, they're taking mission-critical time away from their projects and their programs to invest in this. There's really only one thing you need to read here, and it's the last point. If you sum the total amount of work effort, it's over 62 years since 2003 on this. I think there's no clearer indication of how seriously NASA regards team performance risk and getting context right and developing their people. You can train anybody to do scheduling. You can train people to do it well, but this is the stuff that controls their greatest risk, the people, not the technology. So I'd like you to have a reflection on where are your teams and your leadership behaviours taking you right now? Are you comfortable? And are you okay with where you're at? Because we'd like to invite you to be able to try the same thing that NASA does. And you can do this for free. You don't need Simon or I. We can contribute advice and guidance, sure. You can log on to 4dsystems.com and get a free dashboard and try this with your team. That process is fully confidential. It's not only online and anonymous. Only you can share your results to your teams. 4D Systems will never do so. The person helping you with the assessment, if you have somebody, will never do so. And Simon and I are happy to send you guidance on how to begin, should you wish. I'd like to leave you with a thought before we head into questions. It's actually not from NASA, it's from Margaret Mead, the anthropologist. She said something I think very powerful here. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world, because indeed it's the only thing that ever has. I would like to change her wording. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed executives taking part in this webinar can change the world, because in fact you are the only thing that ever will. Thank you very much for your time. We're now going to shift into questions. I hope we have some questions as they've been coming through, Simon.
Great, Ian. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. We have a few questions indeed, and not too much time, so I'd like to move directly into that. And we'll do this in a kind of interview question-answer style.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so the first question we had is, how is this different from other assessments? For example, Myers-Briggs and Belbin.
Okay. Look, the short answer is these are powerful self-reflection tools on personality, and I don't want to do them in an injustice with just a quick answer, but they're fundamentally self-reflection. Belbin does, of course, call out roles for teams as well, A key difference with 4D is that it's a focus on all individuals developing behavioural health, not just adopting a key role or a single limiting role as that. For example, I was born right-handed. There's no reason at all, that's innate to me, but there's no reason at all I can't use my left hand, and I can learn to use my left hand better in terms of handwriting, for example. So the focus is on consistent behaviour, whereas these tools tend to internalise.
Okay. Do you
Great
use
question, by the way.
Next question. Do you use this yourself, and how has it helped you?
Yeah, for myself personally, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I've been using this since 2011. I credit the process when I'm saying this. As a direct result of using this myself, I've been promoted 3 times, had the honour to be invited to go and work with NASA and be invited back. I have had the honour to be elected a National Director of the Australian Institute of Project Management, which I serve at the pleasure of the membership on, and I am utterly convinced that I wouldn't have had the insight to adjust my tack, my approach, my learning if I had not done this. That's my personal story on this. As an organisation, UXC Consulting also uses this as an important part of our performance as well, at a team and individual level. Great question.
Okay, the next question. Is there a minimum number of team members when it makes sense to use it?
That's an excellent question. Yes, typically, although you can run it with less than 5 members, the system actually sets it where you're starting to have a couple of people, and anonymity can easily be compromised. If there's only 2 people in the team, and I know it's not me, it's you, and one of the things we do is anonymity is so important to help people call out the elephants in the room and the team, so you can all go hunting them and go deal with them in a constructive way. The maximum team size is 24. The reason is, beyond that, it really looks like you've aggregated more than one team. And again, just a little bit on the smaller size. While you can do it with a smaller size, you have to get the permission of the individuals that is okay. We'd suggest most teams are easily 5 members or greater, but it's possible with smaller. Again, another good question. Please do keep them coming.
How frequently should you be doing the review?
Well, the first thing is a team has to develop common ways of working. So in week 1, you might talk about what behaviours are desirable, but you clearly can't assess if they're healthy or not yet. We'd suggest a team is together for at least 8 weeks. And then you've got to give your team enough time and attention on this to make sure behaviours have changed. We recommend a frequency of about quarterly is a good frequency for most organisations. But really, the more attention you keep on this, the easier it is to shift. I have seen teams shift from below average to above average within a span of 6 months. But so one of the key sayings within the 4D system is where attention goes, power flows. What do you do to keep your attention? It's the action items on this. So again, your frequency is what makes sense for you. I'd suggest 3 months is a healthy number to think of first.
We can have...
Most sensible.
Okay, on to the next question.
Yep.
We can have highly effective teams, but how can this link to organization maturity? And how can this link in with current best practice in assessing organization maturity?
Okay, I guess there's a lot backstage behind organizational maturity. I'm going to pick just one angle, and please do contact me if I haven't fully answered your question, to say maturity of culture. Culture is just a nice word for context too. It's the way we do things around here, and the maturity of the organization in terms of leadership, appetite for disagreement, constructive disagreement, I think is one of the areas where this has helped. The Marshall example is a good example of that. It became normal for people to seek areas when there was conflict or disagreement, say, well, what do you want? And How do we buy into that? What's there that we can genuinely want for you too? You cannot power struggle if you agree on fundamentals. By the way, this is Harvard Business School on the basis of all negotiation too. What's our shared interest here? That's one of the 8 behaviours we talk about in 4D. There's a lot of other behaviours that reinforce it. I'd be pleased if you drop me a line to share more of the Marshall story with you, because that directly relates to organisational maturity.
Okay. Is there a list of things to change or suggestions how to improve?
There's prompting suggestions, but there's no one right answer. For example, if you want to raise the behaviour, make and keep agreements, is the problem that people are running late to meetings? Is the problem that you have to perpetually follow up with people? The causes are different and our organisations are different. Remember, this is about healthy behaviours to take control of context and improve it, shift it to where it's easier to demonstrate those behaviours. This becomes self-reinforcing. So you have to choose the actions that are going to work for you and the ones that you're comfortable to perform. That's why it's collaborative with the team. They then take accountability instead of an external party using a list to tell you what you need to do. Nobody knows your context better than you do.
Okay. Next question. What's the best advice you can give to get going with this?
Try it. It's as simple as that. The best advice is to simply try it. It costs you nothing more than a little of your personal time to go and have a look, register for a dashboard. That costs you nothing as an organisation. Go try an assessment. There's a wealth of supporting materials on this too. I'm happy to talk you through that process gratis. I'm happy to support you. Simon, I'm sure, is happy to take your inquiries as well about how this might fit within a project objects story as well, within organisational maturity as well, and technology and process. So try it is the easiest way.
Okay. Is the system used outside of NASA?
Yes, Ernst & Young, Electricité de France. It's currently being trialled within a number of federal agencies over here for confidentiality reasons as clients. I obviously can't disclose exactly that detail. It's been used in the private sector. It's been used within major banking clients. It has been used in a Chinese shoe factory of over 200,000 people to help them shift their operational culture. It has been used in over 75 countries all around the world. NASA have a tiny view on it, and the data that's being benchmarked against is not entirely NASA. It includes NASA, but it's actually drawn from data since 1995 on this. We're coming up to the 20th anniversary next year of this being in operation, and NASA started working with this in 2003. On team performance risk, the reason they brought 4D systems in to help was they never wanted another challenger. And unfortunately, on the day the contract was being executed to start this work, Columbia burned up on re-entry. From the failure review board on Columbia, the conclusion was, yes, a rescue may have been possible, and I leave it for you to guess what the real root cause was of that accident.
Okay, we've still got a couple more questions. So the next question is, how do you deal with a team manager if he or she is the issue, and how do you capture that performance?
Well, we often see that when a team is benchmarked in the red, that below average, well below bottom quintile performance, we call this, that there's one of 7 deadly sins in place. And it can be due to power struggles with larger organisations. Flawed team leadership is another common cause of that. This is one of the reasons why we brief the team leader first, and if we see they're in the red, then the question to ask is, which ones of these are in play? What's your view? Our experience is that more often than not, the team leader will say, I think it's me. It's an interesting thing because that might seem counterintuitive, but quite often we promote people who have been excellent experts in an area, delivered really well, into managerial positions where they're suddenly not doing the job about their expertise. It's about looking after people. or we don't often support them in that journey when we make that change. And it's a really big mindset change. I see a lot of technical people and a lot with project engineers who become project managers, for example. So having the conversation up front in that way is the way we call it out. To help the individual, we focus on the individual development assessment rather than the team, where they will nominate their reviewers. And again, same process and system, online and anonymously. Their reviewers will call out where they see the strengths and weaknesses. Again, all of these are against a standard, what good looks like, so we can measure, remeasure. We support those people through coaching. Some people are capable of taking the journey forward themselves, of course.
Okay, we're nearly running out of time, so I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay, yep, that's great.
Okay, so the first question is, how can you manage a team or increase the team's efficiency through conflict?
I think there's constructive conflict is shown under 4D, where we appropriately include others for a start. We don't shut out their voices. It's shown through the behaviour of expressing reality-based optimism. The way I put that is, what's the elephant in the room, and what are we going to be able to do about it? Because if we just stick our head in the sand about it, then you're just going to drive conflict underground. You're not working on the real problem. So I think that it provides a safe set of behaviours to be able to have different ideas, but it focuses on outcome as well. So the second of the visionary behaviours is being 100% committed. Classic example from NASA, we're going to the moon, get out of the way. If you've got a problem, call the president. Would you be in any doubt about the level of commitment? So we can disagree healthily about the way we get there, but nobody disagrees about the goal, and you must have that clarity, whether it's an organisational vision from the CEO, from the board, from your project manager. It doesn't matter. That behaviour is essential to keep people glued.
Okay, here's the last question, and you've got 1 minute.
Sure.
Are the 4D questions always the same?
Yes. No, because there's a universal standard for this. This has been checked in country after country after country with consistent application.
Great, thank you, Ian. We're almost out of time, and I'd like to wrap up quickly.
Sure. Thank you, Simon, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
It's been incredible to hear about this and to learn from your experience. And it's really fantastic to gain some insight as to how NASA works. Given the volume of questions we've received, I think the topic has really struck a chord as a challenge that many teams face. And of course, it presents an opportunity if you have a focus on team performance. We've recorded today's session, and we will send the link to all of you. However, please feel free to contact either of us, and I'll include our contact details in the email if you have any questions on the 4D system or of how my product and project objects can help you. So thank you all, and I look forward to future events like this.
Thank you very much, everybody, and all the very best of luck with your teams.